They found a folded scrap of paper buried behind a heap of children's clothes, small, overlooked, and heavy with meaning. If you care about justice for Lily and Jack, hit subscribe now and ring the notification bell so you're first to know when new leads appear. This story needs every set of eyes and ears. The letter, as described by those who've seen it and by officials familiar with the investigation, reads like a private alarm. Sharp, specific, fearful. It apparently names a person of concern, lays out a timeline of worry, and warns that something planned could separate the children from the home. That single note has reopened old questions, pushed people back into the woods searching, and forced public agencies to admit they may have missed what mattered most. A cramped piece of paper discovered in a storage bin behind tiny shirts and blankets may sound like the stuff of dramatic fiction, but in investigations like this, a found note can change everything. For weeks, neighbors have been combing the property, focusing on footpaths, low branches, and the pipeline trail. Nobody expected a clue to be stashed inside the house itself. The choice to hide the letter behind the children's clothing suggests secrecy and urgency. Someone wanted the note to be kept, but not found in plain sight. That detail matters because it tells investigators something about motive and mindset. A message left openly on a table is different from a note folded into a storage bin. The latter implies fear of discovery and possibly an attempt to preserve a record if something went wrong. When Child Protective Services, CPS, reportedly compared handwriting and, according to internal sources, confirmed the note was penned by the children's mother, its weight grew heavier. Handwriting confirmation, if accurate, changes the note from rumor to a traceable piece of evidence connected to a person at the center of the case. Investigators treat such confirmations with procedural care. Samples must be documented, comparisons made by trained examiners, and the context of each sample considered. A mother's handwriting on a desperate warning is a powerful lead. It can direct inquiries to specific people, times, and places, and it can help frame motive and urgency. But handwriting matches alone do not convict or absolve. They simply help shape the investigative map. According to the letter's content as relayed by those briefed on it, the writer warned of a premeditated plan to remove the children from the home. That phrase is chilling because premeditation implies planning and intent rather than a spur-of-the-moment decision. If the letter dates from before the disappearance, and if it accurately describes the risk, then it suggests a window of opportunity when intervention might have made a difference. Detectives will want to know who else knew about any plan. Were there messages, calls, or actions that corroborate the letter's claims? If a plan existed, what were its contours? A drive away at dawn, an agreement with a third party, or something more elaborate? Each possibility directs investigators toward different evidence streams. Vehicle records, witness statements from neighbors, surveillance footage from nearby roads, and digital records like messages or searches that could show planning. Equally troubling is the notion, reported by some sources, that prior CPS visits had noted concerns, possible neglect, and visible bruising among the children, but that those cases were downgraded or closed. If accurate, that sequence raises immediate institutional questions. What threshold of concern triggers sustained intervention? How are allegations evaluated? And crucially, do resource limits or procedural hurdles prevent timely protective action? Child welfare systems work within legal and practical boundaries. They must balance civil liberties with safety, requiring a level of evidence before removing a child or imposing controls. But when warning signs stack up and a parent writes a frank, detailed note of fear, the duty to probe deeply becomes sharper. The community's anger is rooted in that tension, the sense that paperwork and protocols outran the urgency of protecting vulnerable children. Another painful line of inquiry is whether any protective legal measures, restraining orders, supervised access agreements, or criminal charges, were ever pursued against the individual named in the letter. The absence of restraining orders or legal action is often explained by prosecutors or CPS as a lack of evidence sufficient to meet legal standards. Courts require proof to limit a person's freedom. Still, from an emotional perspective, the lack of formal measures can look like inaction. For families and neighbors watching a child at risk, the world can feel slow and unresponsive. Investigators will ask whether there were opportunities to pursue interim protections, to escalate monitoring, or to demand safety plans. Each no on those questions becomes a point of frustration and, in some eyes, culpability. The public reaction to the letter, arriving now after months of silence and searching, has been sharp and split. For some, the note reads as a clear warning, a mother doing everything she can to document a threat before tragedy. For others, its contents appear ambiguous, prompting discussion about whether the letter reads as confession, as manipulation, or as literal fear. That debate is understandable. Human communication is layered and complex. A phrase like, "I will take the kids," can be read as a threat, as a plan to flee for safety, or even as a cryptic metaphor. The timing also complicates interpretation. A note discovered after the fact can read differently to those who already suspect foul play than it would have months earlier. Social media amplifies these tensions. Fragments of the letter can be posted, reinterpreted, and then turned into viral narratives that outrun official clarification. What the letter did do, without question, is force institutions to act publicly. After scrutiny intensified, CPS acknowledged missteps and announced an expanded search effort, including remote locations that had not been covered in the initial sweeps. The agency's public concession, that prior signs were not acted on robustly enough, is rare and important. It marks a shift from confidentiality to public accountability, a response to both community pressure and the moral weight of potentially missed intervention. When authorities admit error, it's a painful but necessary step. It opens the door to improved practices, independent review, and a focus on prevention. In this case, the admission also galvanized volunteers who had been exhausted from weeks of searching. That volunteer effort has surged. Community groups remobilized, plotting grid searches into brambles and ridgelines, bringing additional canine teams and specialized volunteers who know the land. Where previously searches may have been locally organized and patchy, the letter's release concentrated energy and attention, turning scattered goodwill into coordinated action. Ordinary citizens have organized supply chains for water, radios, and GPS grids. Off-road drivers with knowledge of the backroads volunteered to reach hard-to-access ravines. Social media groups that once argued over details are now scheduling shifts, coordinating with official liaisons, and mapping searched areas to avoid duplication. That surge in community involvement underscores a civic truth. When institutions falter, ordinary people frequently become the engine that keeps a search alive. The grandmother, a figure of raw emotion and tenacity, became a central voice in the renewed mobilization. Her live streams, thick with grief and pleading, drew thousands of viewers and reignited public engagement. In an era where live video can spark immediate reaction, her unscripted appeals were both heartbreaking and galvanizing. She described frustrations, nights without answers, the hollow ache of not knowing, and a fierce demand for thorough search efforts. The grandmother's live streams humanized the search in a way press releases cannot. People responded not to policy statements, but to a woman's face, voice cracking, begging for action. That emotional connection translated into new volunteers, new donations for search supplies, and a fresh wave of tips called into police lines. Officials have taken a different tone, calm, procedural, and urgent. They've urged anyone with information to come forward immediately, to call tip lines, upload dashcam footage, or consult personal recordings for the days around the disappearance. The emphasis now is on time-sensitive evidence, vehicle sightings, recent social media posts, and any digital or physical trace that could be located before it fades. Investigators stress that even small details matter. The color of a jacket, a partial license plate number, the sound of a lawnmower at an odd hour. Public-facing appeals often combine an emotional plea with a practical one. If you saw it, say it. Don't assume someone else already has. The takeaways are stark and urgent. Crucial evidence can remain overlooked for months, especially when it is hidden in plain sight inside a home. Such delays can squash the narrow time windows that matter in missing persons cases. Official inaction, whether due to legal thresholds, resource strain, or judgment calls, can erode trust. Yet that erosion sometimes fuels public mobilization that, paradoxically, keeps the search alive. Emotional appeals, particularly from loved ones, can cut through media noise and mobilize volunteers quickly. But ambiguous messages, like the letter in question, can divide the public between suspicion and sympathy, complicating exactly how people choose to help. Finally, the importance of time-sensitive tips cannot be overstated. An eyewitness account given early can reorient an entire search, while the same detail offered months later may be less useful. This story is still unfolding. The letter is a raw, painful prompt that asks uncomfortable questions about warning signs, institutional response, and human frailty. It has reignited efforts, legal, communal, and investigative, and it has changed how neighbors, agencies, and volunteers approach the hunt. If you have any information that could help, please call the official tip lines immediately. Your memory, no matter how small it seems, might be the detail that unlocks the next step. And if you want to stay informed and help keep the pressure on until Lily and Jack are found, like this video and subscribe so we can continue reporting every confirmed development.